Everything can always be better, but I
Yeah,
give
yeah.
plenty thanks. Growing up during the times of the National Front, we're talking about the 70s, particularly.
See,
And before that, in the 60s, they were called skinheads, mods, and rockers. And then, Enoch Powell came into play around the early 70s. And then within years of that, the National Front was formulated in full swing. And it was a very tense period of time because it was constant racism in every aspect and dimension possible. Within schools, within the workforce, involving our parents, within any kind of constitutional environment, there was some kind of tension happening because of this negative setback called racism
see,
perpetrated by the National Front. Music became a very integral part of our community, the Black community.
see,
And that was based off, Jamaicans in particularly, people
yeah,
from the Caribbean, bringing over their forms of music during the Windrush expedition. So they came over with their own form of music, whether it was calypso, blues, came over to be part of the British experience. They came with that
see,
format of music.
yeah,
And that became part of our culture, part of our heritage, part of, information, communication between us and the island we originally came from. It was our teenage years when reggae became more like a political, strong arm kind of perception.
yeah,
So it wasn't just the music anymore. It was the content of the music. So during the 60s, when reggae was established as a music format, there was a lot of happy-go-lucky type of songs coming from the Gaylords, coming from the Ethiopians, coming from your Alton Ellises, your
big
Toots and the
youths.
Maytals, your Ken Boots.
Yeah,
By the time it turned into the 70s, during my teenage years at school, we started to hear music from, acts like the Wailing Souls, Burning Spear, most in particularly, and Bob Marley and the Wailers. And these guys were coming with all kind of ammunition as far as us speaking of not being part of Britain, but more being part of our African heritage.
yeah,
So there was a Rastafarian culture that sort of evolved during that period of time. And it was all about repatriation, all about chanting down Babylon. Marcus Garvey album has been probably, I'd say, the biggest influence.
see,
And one of the reasons is because when he says no one remembers old Marcus Garvey,
yeah,
my parents, for example, are originated from St. Anne's, Jamaica.
see,
And as you know, Burning Spear came from St. Anne's, Jamaica. And
yeah,
so did Marcus Garvey, if you know about the history of Jamaica and Marcus Garvey. So when I heard this and started to do my research, I knew that Marcus Garvey came from St. Anne's, which was a very neck of the woods my parents came from. I became very concerned that my parents never told me about a person that I thought was one of the most significant in life. And they've
see,
never even mentioned his name, not even once, not even for a second in our
mm,
household. We saw Handsworth as a ghetto, and we thought it was necessary to have ourselves accentuate our community. And Handsworth Revolution became the thing to talk about, especially in light of the riots and things that were to take place within 3 years of recording that album.
yeah,
So we saw the significance of expressing ourselves from our own community, and Handsworth was the yardstick for that. So everything Carl suggested for us to do in the studio, we wanted to do the opposite because we said, no, we don't want nobody touch our sound. That would be a sound. What we want a bass sound like that for? And we have our bass sound. This is our bass running over there. Why are we going to want to mask his sound with another
yeah,
sound when he's a bass player? And
see,
Carl was trying to explain, this is the sound we're going to want because you guys sound so unique. I've always wanted to experiment with a band like yourselves because all the bands I've worked with out of Jamaica don't have your sound. I just want to make your sound better.
yeah,
And we towards the end, we started to gravitate to what he was trying to do, trying to understand what he was coming from. And we got there in the end, but not in its totality. And when I look back on it with a lot of regrets because, you had Oswald that came with what the song name?
Was it Back to
Dennis
Africa?
Brown did Dennis Brown did a song called To the
Oh,
Promised Land. Dong,
Promised Land, yeah.
doke, doke, dong, 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 dong.
Yeah.
Doke, doke, dong, dong.
Yeah.
And it was a song that Aswa did called what's the name of that song? They had
That was on the the night, I forgot, man.
And not myself, but 6 other people that was in Steel Pulse at the time totally agreed with being ignorant. So, you know, it was a success that the album brought Steel Pulse as an introductory debut album to the world. But the setback was, wow, it could have been so much better had we had listened to Carl Peterson. So by the time we got to the True Democracy album, we said, yes, Carl, go, Carl, 3 bags full, Carl. How high do you want us to jump, Carl? We also had mutiny within the band itself, where there was certain band members that were threatening to leave because there was no money and no record label. All the good times, all of a sudden, Island Records sort of dumped us at that time, and we decided to go back to Carl Peterson, who was also dumped by the record label. And it was more like a rock bottom revenge type of album. We recorded the album on an island off the coast of Denmark. And it was the quickest recorded album we've ever done in the history of all the albums Steel Pulse have recorded. And it was because of no money. But we had the expertise of Carl Peterson, and we recorded the album in 25 days.
Yeah.
And it was all about us having the songs that we did as demos presented to Carl while we were in New York, when we bumped into him in New York 3-4 months before. And we just said, you know what, let's record this album and let's make it the best we can and teach the record label a lesson. And we did. Significant. What was significant, I'd say, during that period of time was 1981.
Yeah.
October 1981, we recorded the album. And Steel Pulse by that time was in full swing of being into the Rasta culture. So everybody was wearing dreadlocks at that time. Yeah. So that's to begin with. So everybody started to read Bible more intense than ever before. Read about all our heroes more intense than ever before. Like I said, Marcus Garvey. But we weren't only reading Marcus Garvey. We were reading, the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey. We were also reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. We're also reading about things that was happening with in South Africa itself with Steve Biko. Nelson Mandela. Like I said, the Bible had chant a psalm, and there was also our American experience where we wrote a song called "Who Responsible." "Who's Responsible" was written based on the situation that took place with the Deptford bombing in London, but it was also a similar kind of crisis happening with blacks in the United States, where children were missing and suffering at the same time. So children were equally losing their lives in America at the time, in Atlanta. So we started to compose a song along those lines where we're talking about the Deptford bombing, the Atlanta killings, and things that was happening in South Africa. When we say Azania was coming, because we were also into what was going on politically in South Africa, where South Africa, we were expecting to get its independence and for it to change its name, just like how Zimbabwe changed its name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. We expected South Africa to change its name to Azania. That's why we say, talking down south, Azania coming. That's why we said that. So these were the things. We were really, Steel Pulse was at the heights, at the zenith of our career in regards to us being attached so much to education and information that was at our disposal at that time. So yeah, that's what happened during that recording.
Yeah. So, I mean, you are also known for your legendary dreadlocks, which you've had for almost your whole life. So, I mean, could you say, how did that all come about? Yeah.
Well, the dreadlocks was like, there was so many things out there, images of Rasta, and Steel Pulse sort of adored the authenticity of what the Rastaman represented, both visually, spiritually, mentally, and the whole 9 yards. And I started off wearing my dreads where I used to wear a bowler hat on stage.
Yeah.
And the lock started to take the shape of the hat after a while, if you see what I'm saying. So I used to wear this bowler hat, and over time it sort of matted together a particular way. And I had no wish of changing what he was doing, where everybody was grooming their dreads and making it neat and all that kind of stuff. You know, like how you know, the Rastafarian was doing it, making it neat and grooming it and grooming the beard. I said, no man, make it go rough like the Rastas I might see in Jamaica, like how it is. I just, let it loose. So that's what we did. And so after a while, over years, I was known for it. I got all kinds of criticism all over the world for it, good and bad and indifferent. Mostly for me, when it comes to the legendary Grizzly, is his style of drumming that was far removed and far different from the drummers that were around at that time doing reggae. Because Grizzly wasn't a reggae drummer. If you see what I'm saying, Grizzly was not a reggae drummer at all. He adapted reggae over time. He was actually a funk drummer. Did R&B songs, your Earth, Wind and Fire songs, bands like that. Isley Brothers songs, war songs. Grizzly would be more open for that kind of style. So that kind of style also had a particular way to do drum rolls, had a particular way to fill in between drum patterns, had a particular way to play certain types of kick drum patterns, which was very much far removed from reggae as we know it, which was a one drop or the straight four or the steppers. Grizzly wasn't known for any of those kind of styles. So, we took it on ourselves to say, all right, since you don't know this style, can we try this style? And we decided to marry certain types of styles that he would have been already familiar with versus styles that that was already out there. So if you listen back on songs like Ku Klux Klan, for example, that had a completely different drum pattern style that you'd hear in reggae. And if you listen to Tribute to the Martyrs, which was another drum pattern style that was completely different to what was going on in reggae. Listen to Chanter Song, which is another completely different style that was going on in reggae. Rally Around the Flag was another drum pattern that was completely different that was going on in reggae. And also Blues Dance Raid. Songs like that were showing you that Steel Pulse had a different groove.
We see all over West Africa, all the Sahel, the leadership are kicking out France, Burkina.
Yeah.
Mali, and now Niger. So I mean, this is indeed a historic time for Africa. So I mean, can you give us your take on this?
When it comes to the Caribbean, for example, not that I'm veering from the subject, you had Spain, you had Holland, you had France, and you had United Kingdom that were the major ball players when it came to colonizing and also the slave trade. When you fast forward now from the slave trade and come and talk about now, you find that all the countries that colonized the Caribbean have given their countries, the islands that they colonized, independence. And as you can see, Barbados is now a republic, so which has no affiliation with Britain at all, or any European country at all. They're a standalone country. And you'll find that France, out of all these countries, still have hold of all the countries they had colonized and had during slavery.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. So you fast forward now and you flip the script over to Africa. These countries that France once colonized are still an integral part of France when it comes to France making money from these countries.
Yeah.
So you got Ivory Coast, you got Mali, you got Senegal, you got Gabon, you got Niger, you got all these Guinea-Conakry, all these countries that France once colonized, no longer colonized, but they still have a lot of monies paying towards France's well-being. something to the tune of €500 million every year. So remember, you know, there's this country called France that is no longer colonizing these countries, and they're still raking in as much as €500 million from these countries. These countries are indebted to France for this reason. So now, all of a sudden now, these countries have plucked up the courage, because Rastafari has been chanting down Babylon for some time and saying, yo, Africa must unite. And you got Africans are saying there's no way we can unite. Then all of a sudden, Africa starts to unite now. And you find countries like Niger and Mali are kicking France out. And you find countries like Gabon, who was part of France, are kicking their leaders out. So all these countries are now starting to kick their leaders out, because these countries have always had leaders that have been puppets for France. There's other countries as well. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of countries in Africa right now that have a lot of leaders, whether British, or from British origin, from Spanish origin, German origin, or Italian origin, that are there having their leaders as puppets for these European countries. And I see now what's going on in Africa, that the table is slowly turning. Russia and China are getting more involved into Africa. We know some of them are getting involved for unscrupulous reasons. Let's not, you know, beat about the bush with that either. However, Africa is looking at it where they're trying to develop using the better of all these evils, if this is what I'm saying. So now that Niger now and Mali, you got Algeria who's saying, you know, although Algeria is a Arabic type country, Algeria, for the most part, do consider themselves as part of being Africa. If you see what I'm saying, themselves as being part of the continent. So they say, no, France, you cannot fly over our airspace to do what you want to do with Mali and Niger. So this is where, you know, Africa is uniting, whether they're from an Arabic standpoint or from a sub-Saharan standpoint, and like in the case of Niger and all those other type countries, if you see what I'm saying. So yes, I do see what's going on within, you know, within Africa itself and the diaspora for that matter. Yeah.
So I mean, what is your like your take on repatriation? Like, do you think it's necessary for everybody in a diaspora to like move?
I do see it necessary for everybody in the diaspora to see what's going on in Africa. Yeah. Obviously, when we started out as Rastafarians, repatriation was the key message, was paramount. This is what I'm saying.
See.
So repatriation, yes. In a physical sense, I don't see that as totally necessary anymore if you don't want to, but I do see it as paramount when it comes to where the mind should be at. We should be thinking along, knowing how to enhance that continent, especially knowing how much the continent has to offer the world and how much it's been exploited in the meantime. And, you know, when it comes to the economical status that it has. Would I like to know that I'm out there in Africa? Yes, I'm still planning on going out there. I'm spoiled rotten right now, because every time I go to Africa, I go, I like this place. I mean, I've been to Senegal. I said, I like this place. I've been to Gambia. I said, I like this place. Ivory Coast, the same thing. Ethiopia, the same thing. I really like this place. And my most recent visit to Africa has been Kenya. And I said to myself, I like this place. So I'm spoiled at the moment as to where I would ultimately like to rest my head. Ghana is, I'd say, at the top of the list, because I'm more familiar with the place. And as you know, if you know about the history of the Caribbean, especially, you know, the English-speaking Caribbean, most of the slaves came from Ghana. So I do see a part of an attachment to Ghana more than anywhere else at the moment. And, you know, most people who know of Ghana and familiar with Jamaica before independence, they always compare the two places as being one of the same. So yeah, I do see repatriation.
I remember, I think this was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I remember like a lot of people were looking forwards to the movie Dreadtown movie.
Oh gosh. We were all looking towards Dreadtown, and we have not
Yeah,
forgotten Dreadtown at all.
yeah,
Unfortunately, the situation arose where we were recording and doing a lot of research with some directors that were part of the project. And as it stood, we wanted to have the project be handled in a fun, professional environment, a professional, how could I say, handled where we know it's going to deserve and get its full accolade once it's released as a documentary or a film or whatever terminology one would want to call it at this moment. The people that we selected, we needed to have sponsors, we needed to have people in place, investors, to finish this project. Investors came about in the form of funding, like your GoFundMe type of projects, and other type of investments that we knew that needed to complete the project, where we could afford to pay people to do the editing, pay people to get certain types of interviews going, pay people to make the video a much better video, and give the people what they've been longing to see and longing to deserve to get once they've received it. To say, it was worth the wait. Unfortunately, the directors that we had in our position at the time didn't want to see the project fall into the hands of people that were more professional than they were. And we're saying, but we need to get the project that we can give it the best shot, and everybody will get the credit they deserve. All that have worked on it, including ourselves, would get that credit because the project has been put into more of a profession in it. So it became to a bit of a stalemate where they decided to hold on to the film, and we couldn't go any further with that project because ego started to kick in and ignorance, and we could not get hold of that project to complete it. But we hope to come to some kind of resolution and come to some kind of agreement where we can push it forward, get the investors and the sponsorship that we need to complete it, and bring it back on board. About reggae music within the Black community, and as such, sort of made what we had as an idea, which was unique at the time, solely to become redundant. Because hang on, it's no longer becoming unique, because this is what Steel Pulse was talking about now. And the BBC slowly releasing their little, sound bites and visual bites of how it was in the Black community throughout Britain. So we knew that we needed to be coming with a different type of cutting edge to make the film become more of an interest. And us making it more interesting now would mean Steel Pulse touring the world and what we've seen throughout the world and the people we've met along our route, along our journey. I would say my first recognition of that there was something wrong with the planet is when I saw this head bobbing like this on a Friday all day. And this head that I saw bobbing like this on a Friday back in 1963, back in November the 22nd, 1963, all day was the head of John F. Kennedy when he was assassinated. We saw that film every single day for the rest of the year of this man who was the United States 35th president being assassinated. And I knew right there and then there was something wrong with the world, because at that time I saw my parents cry. I saw other Black people crying. And I'm saying, why are they crying? And the reason why they were crying is because of what was going on in the United States at the time involving racism. That they thought at that time that President Kennedy, with the sound bites he was letting off during his news medias, was the hope for Black people to have a lease of life, of survival. And with him being taken out the way he was taken out, had a lot of Black people across the world crying, if you see what I'm saying. So from that moment in time, I think it dawned on me there was something wrong with the world.
On the podium in 1968, where they balled up their fists and received a lot of hate from the world. So I mean, could you speak to us about that, please?
All right. So you're talking about an incident that took place 5 years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Now, that was the Mexico Olympics in 1968, where all what Kennedy was trying to Kennedy was trying to bridge that gap between the races within the United States itself by trying to pass a civil rights bill that gave the black man the right to vote. Disrespect that they were given by these two athletes, and those guys were immediately sent home and discredited. A lot of things that nobody are not really privy to know, but I went fast forward several years later. I happened to meet one of the athletes, John Carlos. He came to one of our concerts in United States.
Mad.
And role in my life. And John Carlos was one of them. And lo and behold, I meet this individual at a concert. And I did a painting of him. And I presented that painting of him at an awards that he was attending in New York City. And I promised him that the painting was not completed. And I promised him that I would have completed that painting and send it to him. Because John and I, we remained in touch with each other. You know, not many people realize that John went through hell and back after he was sent home. He didn't have any work, unemployment. He lost his family, lost everything for what he stood for back in 1968.
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of people are not aware. Everybody is looking at the incident then, but didn't know what became of this individual after. Fortunate thing now, fast forward now, and I was supposed to be touring a few months ago and supposed to be meeting John, only to realize that where I left the painting in New York, the painting got stolen.
Yo.
Yeah. So I'm here racking my brains now, right? John hasn't known about it. He probably know about it now because I'm telling him. But what I was going to do is paint him another one, give him another one, and then rock and roll. I know John is in his late 70s right now, and thank God he's still in a good bill of health. Where every time I'm calling him, so David, oh man, I'm on the next flight. I'm on my way to sunset. So it gives me hope that he's still there and give me enough time to do another painting of him, so I can present it to him when I do see him again. Racism has never left Europe. Racism has never left America. And one of the problems we had touring America at the time, outside using our tour bus, was to catch taxis, and especially in the city of New York. I mean, at that time, we were living it up, staying in 4- and 5-star hotels. So it became easier once we came out of the hotel, not being able to catch a cab because the cab went by because we were a black person, go back to the doorman or the bellman that was opening the door for us and have them stop the cab to let us get into taxi. So it became difficult though outside of that environment where we were at train stations trying to catch a taxi uptown. And I remember traveling once with my son, and my son at the time was 2.5 years old, and I had to throw him Baruch. Baruch was about Baruch was about 9 at that time. But I do when I wrote did that video. But I do remember when Baruch was about 2.5, and I was carrying him with me uptown in Manhattan, and the taxi never wanted to stop to put him in there. So I finally caught the taxi at a stoplight. So he had no choice. And at that time, they weren't locking their doors with central lockings like how we know it at the time. For some reason, he was unable to lock his cab. And I opened the back door and I threw the kid. Yes, I threw him like a kid. I threw him in the cab. And the taxi driver had no choice but to pull over and let me jump in the cab with him. And we went uptown, and that was the experience.
Yeah.
So that's how I caught it. And so we actually did a video based on that experience. And it became a political issue where people from the news media got hold of the experience. Al Sharpton, who was a very high profile representative of the black community in the United States, he came on board with it as well. Even the person that was interviewing me, there was a black journalist who off camera came to me and says, "I'm so glad, man, that you're doing this, because even I can't catch a cab." Then I later on I learned that Lenny Kravitz had a problem. Later on I learned that Danny Glover, the famous actor Danny Glover, had a problem. You know, Lethal Weapon.
Wasn't he in the music video as well?
Danny Glover wasn't in that video.
Yeah.
But Robert Townsend was in the video.
Yeah. See it.
And Tony Johnson, who was the head organizer of Reggae Sunsplash in Jamaica, was in the video.
Yeah.
Jay Leno, who was a very high profiled talk show individual, that was in the video. They all, from the moment they saw what the video was about, they say, "Hey, I want to be part of this." And they jumped in. And that's how we actually bought that video and let it see the light of day, for the mere fact that there's so many high profile individuals of the United States wanted to be part of it. But so that's what brought the news, the whole thing as a high profile news. Guess what? There's some dreadlocks guys suing the New York State Taxi and Limousine Commission. And it became, wow, big news. And that's how we got on board with it. Obviously, legally speaking, you couldn't really sue the Taxi and Limousine Commission as such, because there were individual taxi cab drivers that were part of that entity, as opposed to them employing taxis to go out there. They were actually cab drivers that got a license to drive and decide to drive and get their money on that basis. So, you know, that was the conundrum. But it became, like I said, significant news and noteworthy news. Hurricane that took place back in 1988. And it was a relief and a fundraiser for Jamaica. And Steel Pulse became part of that experience. And Spike Lee actually attended that actual event. And that's where we met Spike Lee, and Spike Lee thought it was a good idea if we did a song for his video. And that's what we did. Well, his film, do the right thing. And that's how we got on board within Spike Lee's film itself. And we also did a music video with Spike Lee on our album, State of Emergency album, called Reaching Out. Other film type soundtracks. For example, one of the latest ones we did, although it's been many years ago, 2011, was one called a movie called Rocksteady, starring Mustafa Khan, which is a film based on a youth living upstate New York who wanted to get into sort of a like dirt car racing, so to speak. And I played a part in the film, a small part, and the band played a part in the film, actually performing. But my role was as almost like the youth's guru. I was almost like an advisor for the youth, an old Ras advising a young kid how to move around and how life is, and to teach him the ways of life. So, this is the last thing that I can remember Steel Pulse associating ourselves with in regards to whatever Hollywood has to offer. To the home, guys like Bobby Wine, who is trying to do things for Uganda right now. If you see what I'm saying. And you had Tekan Jafokoli, who was seen as a threat in Ivory Coast for quite some time. You have Alpha Blondy, God bless him as well, who plays a significant role politically within their countries, their politics, if you see what I'm saying. Especially the album sleeves of Our Caliber. our caliber of a band. I mean, as you know, Neville Garrick is also famous for the Confrontation album and the album that
Survival.
the Survival album. So we thought it was a no-brainer. I mean, we were so impressed with the album artwork that he was doing for Bob Marley and the Wailers. It was a no-brainer for us to draw for Neville to do albums for us. And so he did, you know, Babylon the Bandit as well. He did the artwork for Babylon the Bandit.
Noticed it.
Right? And the last album we did, which is the
Mass Manipulation.
The Mass Manipulation album, was actually done by his son, Nesta Garrick, if you know what I'm saying. So Neville has a son that he named after Bob Marley, Nesta, Robert Nesta Marley. And Nesta did our artwork for the Mass Manipulation album. So we're family. And we have a lot of respect for Neville, because Neville is not just an artist. Yeah. Neville is also a highly educated individual. And this new Bob Marley film that's coming out, Neville was that close to Bob that the film directors thought necessary to have Neville every step of the way. And say, well, how would Bob hold a spliff? Bob would hold a spliff like this. But what would Bob say if Bob was confronted with this kind of situation? Well, Bob would act like that. So Neville knew Bob very, very well, extremely well, more than his sons would, because I mean, you know, for you know, a number of years, I knew the ways of Bob, toured with Bob left, right, and center. Part of Bob's artwork, experience, development, lyric writing, everything. These are the roles that acts need to start being more part of, where they show another dimension of themselves. Because I believe that when it comes to artists that have a unique presence, charisma, personality, and have unique way of expressing themselves within their music and outside their music, you find that there's another dimension to them than the dimension that people normally know them for. Is what I'm saying. Well, I think it's about time artists that have those kind of special qualities start to show the other dimensions to themselves other than the music that they're known for. Is what I'm saying. So that's my spin to any up and coming acts. Obviously, know the business. You know, it's no good to you if you're all about the music and have no sense of business whatsoever, because you will not get very far. And in doing so, you make better choices. You make better choices when it comes to management. You make better choices when it comes to your accounting affairs. You make better choices when it comes to knowing people, period, because it's all a package. And you need to know how to read that package. So that's my advice.
One of the greats, I like listen to you all the time. So thank you very much for having the time to reason with me today. Very great pleasure.
Yes, this is David Dredd of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying stay tuned and subscribe to Roots Madiaq TV. Yeah. Subscribe to Roots Madiaq TV.
Come on.
Come on there now. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bless.
Yeah, bless.
Voilà, qui pulse, c'est-à-dire le mot anglais qui veut dire rythme. Et nous l'avons en ce moment sur les images de Jean-Louis Cap. Je vous laisse.
nice. Before the soldiers, things used to be R.E.A. Things used to be nice, so nice. Our country they did enter, yeah, to treading left, right and center. One moment, victims of the massacre, yeah. We've got our spears, we've got our shields, but the guns were greater. Prepare for a slaughter. Give her back I witch doctor. Give her back I black ruler. We don't want a dictator. We don't want a tyrant on ya. TLA, that TLA, who we want. That TLA, who we crave for. That TLA. Soldiers came. When the soldiers came. When the soldiers came. When the soldiers came.